I would not say that the paintings are well known. In a way, I'm not concentrating on Marwan's paintings. I'm concentrating on his drawings that I found in a sketchbook. And the sketchbook, as you know, is usually where artists would make drafts. So in a way, these are drawings that may become someday paintings, but they're not final works. They're draft works. I mean, I found his sketchbooks, and yes, I scanned the sketchbooks. But in the artwork, in the final artwork, I would never call them copies. I would call them like maybe resurrected artworks. And there has to be a difference between an adaptation, a repetition, an appropriation, and a resurrection. They all, and when you adapt an artwork, when you appropriate an artwork, when you repeat an artwork, and when you resurrect an artwork, they all look the same because you're taking something that exists and you're supposedly copying it. But conceptually, it's very different when you say I'm resurrecting a work versus I'm appropriating a work versus I'm adapting a work. I think it's important to talk about why I did not use your walls, why I wanted to build a wall. And the wall I built is not parallel to any of your walls. It's perpendicular. This was very important, and not to use the existing white cube, but to appeal to another period, another historical period before the white cube, when museums were basically people's apartments. That's why I also use wallpaper, and the wallpaper that is very 19th century. So I try to avoid either the white cube or the black box and go back to an earlier mode, which I think has not been exhausted yet. There might be something worth getting from that period. And I also do not use the grid. The frames are not all the same size. That was very important. I don't display them in a single line or in very mathematical ways. It almost looks like they were just thrown up there arbitrarily. That was very important.
가상현실은 제가 봤을 때 실사를 찍어서 그냥 현실을 흉내내서 보여주는 것보다 현실을 넘어서는 어떤 그 이상의 어떤 공간을 보여주는 게 더 의미가 있다고 생각이 돼요. 그래서 항상 가상현실을 할 때는 이제 애니메이션을 주로 선택을 했었고요. 원래 15년 전에 만났던 저희 대상 선생님 얘기거든요. 근데 그분하고 저하고 학교를 동시에 졸업을 했어요. 왜냐하면 저 졸업했을 때 그분은 퇴직을 하셨거든요. 그래서 이제 둘이서 굉장히 친하게 지내고 있었는데, 그분이 이제 선생님이 되시기 전에 24살 때 이제 그 재무설계사 밑에서 이제 여러 가지 이제 실습생처럼 이제 여러 가지 일을 하셨는데, 그 중에 이제 하나가 한 구역마다 가면서 이제 각 집에 들어가서 그 집안에 그 길이가 몇 미터고 높이가 몇 미터, 그 안에 모든 설계도를 이제 그려서 제출을 해야 되는 거였어요. 근데 그 얘기를 해주실 때 너무 재미가 있었던 게, 각 집을 문을 두드릴 때마다 한 세상이, 다른 세상이 다 문이 열리는 것 같았다고 그러면서 얘기를 하시더라고요. 그 중에 이제 하나가 이 새 여인의 이 주제인데, 어느 날 이제 그 새 수집을 하시는 분 집에 이제 들어가시게 된 거예요. 근데 그때 너무 놀라서 그 새들에 대해서 너무 놀랍고 그 뭐랄까요, 경이롭게 그냥 그 자신의 원래 왜 왔는지 그 목적 자체를 잊어버리고 그 새들에 휩싸여서 그 새들 기억밖에 못하고 그냥 나오셨던 그 기억을 해주셔요. 그 기억을 말씀해 주셨거든요. 그래서 그게 되게 마음에 남아 있었어요. 그 젊은 시절에 뭘까라 순진함이라고나 할까요? 근데 그분이 그럴 수 있었던 거는 그런 일상생활에 기대치 않은 어떤 초대 일상적인 어떤 환상 속의 초대라든지 상상적인 요소가 있었을 때 그거를 무시하지 않고 그걸 받아들이셨기 때문에 바로 그렇게 상상 속으로 빠져들어갔다가 나오실 수 있었던 거거든요. 근데 그 순진함과 약간의 그걸 뭐랄까요, 그 자발적으로 받아들일 수 있는 그 자세 같은 게 저는 그게 너무 좋게 느껴져가지고 항상 제가 그 선생님 이야기로서 작업을 한번 해보고 싶었어요. 근데 어린 마음에 그 선생님 기억을 내가 망칠까 봐 겁나서 여태까지 못하고 있다가 얼마 전에 저희 선생님이 74시셨다는 거를 제가 알게 됐어요. 그래가지고 아, 요번에는 선생님 얘기로 작업을 한번 만들어 보고 싶다. 그래가지고 예전에는 항상 그걸 뭐라 그러죠? 리니어리, 처음부터 끝까지 예, 선형적으로 이제 가는 그런 형식의 나레이션을 위주로 작업을 진행을 했었는데, 요번에는 제가 그 선생님이 보았을 법한 그 공간을 제가 굉장히 상상을 많이 했었어요. 근데 이 요점은 그런 공간을 관객들이 직접 그 공간을 체험해 봤으면 좋겠다라는 생각이 들었어요. 그래서 그 공간을 다시 재구성을 했고, 그 다음에 그 추억이라는 개념, 그 과거라는 개념이 저한테는 되게 아직도 흥미로운 주제라서 시간을 내 움직임으로서 조정을 해봤으면 좋겠다라는 생각이 들었어요. 이제 관객들이 오시면 실제로 공간에서 움직일 수 있고, 그 움직임이 나레이션을 앞으로 나가게끔 하는 이제 그런 시도를 해봤어요. 그래서
그렇다면 그 몸을 움직이는 것과 함께 이야기가 달라지는?
이야기가 달라지진 않고요. 이야기는 같은데 만약에 멈춰 서 있게 되면 시간이 멈추는 것처럼 모든 것이 다 멈추고요. 뒤로 가면 이야기가 거꾸로 이제 되는 거 있고, 그다음에 앞으로 가면 이제 이야기가 계속 이제 앞으로 나가는 이제 그런 부족해 그런 정도로만.
The first time I worked with Edward Muybridge stuff was in 2011, and it was in relation to a piece that was set on the construction site of the Shenzhen Stock Exchange in China. And this photograph was taken from the house of one of the owners or one of the directors of the Central Pacific and the Southern Pacific Railroad Corporations, which were also the Southern Pacific anyway. They were owned and operated by the same people, the Central and the Southern. But the Southern Pacific was the first to get the Supreme Court in the United States to rule that corporations could be considered persons under the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution, which basically just gave equal rights to all persons in the United States. And yeah, they basically brought a tax case all the way to the Supreme Court, refusing to pay their taxes in California under the pretext that they were a person as a corporation. And the Supreme Court eventually ruled that indeed they could be considered a person with equal protections as natural persons. And yeah, so there's that. This photograph was taken, let's say, from the, not really the headquarters of that corporation, but from one of its individual owners, one of its directors. And so, yeah, in a way, for me, one of the central questions behind this panorama is what are we seeing? What is it a picture of? Is this a picture of San Francisco in 1878? Is it a picture of the view that this one particularly wealthy individual had? Is it a picture of property, the property that makes up the city? Well, I think there's a lot of, I mean, it's not intentionally obscure or something like that, but let's say the central, well, okay, one of the main things that I wanted to kind of do with this panorama is reconnect it back to this moment in which it occurred, and what was really the kind of one of the largest stories of the day, which is also a story about, as I kind of mentioned before, a story of incorporation in a way, if you consider organized labor to be a form of incorporation, at least in the kind of broad sense that incorporation, like the coming together of many to form a single body and speak with that single body, to be recognized by the law but also, yeah, more generally in society. And so that was going on in the labor strike against the railroads in 1877. And in some ways, Muybridge had provided a detail through which that photograph could be connected to those events. I mean, there's many details in the photographs that relate to those events and how they kind of manifested themselves by the time because it started in the east and it moved west. So by the time it got to San Francisco, the strike was in a, let's say it happened in a different form than it happened in the east. And it was kind of hijacked in San Francisco by this one particular character, Dennis Kearney, who kind of turned it into an anti-Chinese immigrant event, let's say, or mobilization. So these large meetings that happened right at the end of the strikes that were happening across the country in San Francisco started out as meetings about how to organize there, how to take into account the strike. And there were these there are stories within and these stories figure in this kind of detail section of the piece. So this table screen that where there are a number of sources that are laid out, which is kind of guided by this biography that Rebecca Solnit wrote on Muybridge, I think maybe 2003 or something. Anyway, some time ago. And she has a very, I mean, in general, well, let's say her chapter on the panoramas are one of the best cases, I think, of reconnecting those panoramas to that social context in which they were taken. But there seems to be a general disconnect, even with histories of the labor movement in California. For example, there is one of the kind of key texts was written in '35, and there when they describe the effects of the chapter, which is kind of describing how the strike came to San Francisco.
Well, the dictionary project actually started maybe 6 years ago. So in the midst of these 6 years, I think I spent most of the time sort of researching on the individual sort of subjects or motifs that I was interested in. For the first 4 years of the dictionary, it was research, but also the search for a form, for a suitable form that can encompass this, the field of what I was interested in, you know. So with the current format of the dictionary, I think, you know, the interesting thing for me is that the dictionary is not really a form to me at the moment, but rather it is this sort of collection of possibilities or potential. So because we are working at the level of programming and coding, what interests me is that there is great flexibility in how this project can be transformed with each specific exhibition of the work. So at this moment now, I treat the dictionary as this kind of endless experimentation, just pushing how far we can reconfigure the installation, how far I can push the possibilities of working at this level of coding. Not just possibilities in presentation, but also possibilities in process of how I can work with other people. Both the nameless and the name originally came out of terms from the dictionary. So for example, the nameless is about a character known as Leitig, I mean a real historical character, who was basically the Secretary General of the Malayan Communist Party from 1939 to 1947, and who also turned out to be a triple agent. So actually in the dictionary under the letter L, we have L for Leitig, but L also stands for legibility. So for me, Lytic, the character of Lytic is an illegible, meaning unreadable personality. So, you know, that he is one of the terms in the dictionary. And the other work that I'm showing here, which is the name. The name is about the name Jin Z Hanrahan. And Jin Z Hanrahan is basically the name of the author that wrote the first authoritative accounts of the Malayan Communist Party, of the early years of the Malayan Communist Party. And he published the book at a time when a lot of the information required to write the book is restricted or by the British sort of colonial government. So he got hold of information that no one else could. But after some sort of further digging around, one finds that Jin Z Hanrahan most probably, I would say with quite a bit of confidence, that he isn't a real person, but is either a pseudonym or probably a name used by an organization, you know, and under this name is published books of great variety, from the Mexican Revolution to guerrilla warfare tactics. So under G in the dictionary, we have G for Jin Z Hanrahan, but also G for ghost writer. So the link between Jin Z Hanrahan and ghost writing or ghost writer, it's quite obvious. But we also have G for ghost. Ghost because one of the great cliches of thinking about Southeast Asia is that we are supposedly a region that you know, sort of believes in ghosts maybe much more than other places. If you look at some exhibitions done about Southeast Asia, for example, the notion of ghosts and the spectral often comes up. But I would like to think about ghosts in a different form. I like to think about ghosts in a sense of how it was used to describe how ghosts were related in some sense to communism, to Marxism, because as we know, sort of the opening lines of the Communist Manifesto was, I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit here, but a spectre stands over the whole of Europe, you know. So right at the beginning of the Communist Manifesto, we have this notion of communism as being related to the spectral. I mean, Jacques Derrida wrote very beautifully on these ideas in the Spectres of Marx. And in Southeast Asia itself, I think the spectrality of Marxism or communism takes on an interesting kind of resonance, because in most places in Southeast Asia, communism also became this a topic that became a kind of a taboo subject in the last decades. So like in Singapore, communism, for example, is still, the history of our communism or the history of the left has still not really sort of emerged. It's still not something discussed in public. There are still government sort of restrictions and censorships by various ministerial organizations on any kind of discussions related to Marxism. So this repression actually spectralizes it, makes Marxism much more, or rather communism, much more of a ghost. You know, this repression creates this ghostliness. So these are kind of the ideas linked under G. But I chose to name this current version of the dictionary, volume 2, G for ghost writer, because I'm also now expanding the notion of ghost writing to that of the algorithms that are piecing together the two-channel video installation that we are watching live. So the algorithms become a live performer and sort of an author, you know, who doesn't really exist, or it's this set of sort of ghostly protocols, maybe. So, you know, so I guess these three works are kind of linked together by these kind of concepts and narratives.